I am glad to welcome you to this open class on HR gamification. This is the first session of the course, and today's topic is the basics of gamification. So our goal today is to briefly get acquainted with what it is. The course website is Academy Game, and we have a total of 6 sessions in the course. This is the first session. Over these 6 sessions, we will explore different aspects of gamification, including what I would call the most popular area of gamification. We will focus on what people love most and want to gamify in HR. In case we have not met, my name is Mike Pritula, and here is a list of companies I have worked for. In my work, I rely on global best practices. Here is also a list of companies I follow. I would appreciate it if you could tell me a bit about yourself, who you are, and where you are joining from. Please write a few lines about your city, position, and company. This way we will get to know each other if we have not already. If you would be so kind. And while you are writing, I will move on so as not to keep the others waiting. Let me tell you about the homework assignments. Those who complete the course will receive a diploma at the end for successfully completing their homework assignments. We issue the diploma on a special platform. Google Cloud also issues its certificates on the same platform. So we have Yulia here who wrote Yulia, Almaty, and Holding Company. Cool. Welcome. And here is our agenda for today's session. We will discuss what gamification is, its goals and objectives, successful case studies, popular gamification platforms, and we will also talk about how Google does it. That is what we have in store for today's session. Key if people partner boy games. Cool. Thank you. So let's talk about the global gamification market. Gamification is growing worldwide, with more and more companies, businesses, and organizations adopting gamification techniques. In which areas is gamification most popular? Marketing is in first place, where we regularly see various offers. Sales is in second place. Development, particularly software development and HR, is highly gamified. We see these as leaders, and other includes everything else. Each year, the number of gamified solutions grows. Companies are interested, see benefits in it, and therefore implement such approaches. So we can conclude that gamification is a trend. At the bottom of the slide, there's a link to the website where these statistics are published. Next, different departments can be gamified. Another study mentions sales department, marketing department, customer service department, development department, PR department, and others. It's also believed that for some departments, success doesn't depend on whether they're gamified or not. So we'll certainly be talking about HR gamification, but it's important to understand that gamification is available to different departments. So Irina Nikolaev, HR Inspector, AgroFusion Company Group. Cool, welcome. Let's move on. What is gamification? Gamification is the craft of extracting all the fun and engaging elements found in games and applying them to real life or work activities. So when we talk about gamification, it's not just about HR. You can gamify many things. I know for a fact that you also participate in various gamification activities. We'll talk about that now. But in this course, we'll focus more on HR. There are also other terms. Some people also say gamification. For some reason, I prefer gamification. I think it's a more understandable term. But if you hear gamification, it's the same thing. Now regarding gamification. Look, gamification is all around us. All loyalty programs, bonuses, various perks, gifts, cashbacks, it's all gamification. Every day we participate in various gamification activities. It's important to understand that it's all around us. We have a lot of experience participating in it. And of course, if you play computer games, you're definitely experiencing all the principles of gamification, because that's exactly what computer games are built on. So here's the next question for you. If any of you regularly play computer games, please put a plus sign. Who plays something at least once a week? On your phone, it could be just some game where you have to move balls around. I don't know what they're called. It could be some serious game. Maybe someone plays on PlayStation. Maybe someone likes to play poker. So a plus if you play, a minus if you don't. I don't see any pluses yet. The audience doesn't play much. I, for example, love it. I used to really love playing. Now, of course, I have less time, but not fewer opportunities, and I continue to play occasionally. There's a game I like called Hearthstone. I dedicate a few minutes a day to it. Moreover, what's even more interesting is this. One of the world's gurus in gamification was a very serious gamer in the past. He achieved incredible heights in Diablo, and he applied his gaming experience to the real world. His company, whose concept we'll get familiar with today, consults a huge number of different businesses on gamification issues. He's a former gamer. So gamification and gaming experience have a lot in common. Yes, I see minuses, so we don't have many gamers gathered here. Let's move on. So why gamification? So everything related to gamification, when we introduce some game element somewhere, allows us to make task completion, certain actions, or some work more intriguing, motivating, and even fun. In fact, gamification has existed in human communities for a long time. When a small group of people randomly decides to compete with each other in hunting or gathering, or simply starts keeping track of their activities and comparing it to their past records, they adopt principles that prevail in modern games to make tasks more engaging. So even if you're engaged in, for example, sports and keep some kind of record, these are also elements of gamification. Let's move on. When gamification came to work, it's believed that one of the first authors was Charles Coonrat. In 1984, he wrote a book called The Game of Work, where he first described some principles of gamification. So we can consider 1984 as the year when gamification was born in business, or more precisely, at work. That is, in organizing employees' work. That's interesting. We can say that games have existed for a very, very long time, meaning even ancient people were already playing something, but gamification only made it to work in 1984. It's a very curious observation and food for thought that companies paid insufficient attention, and some companies to this day still pay insufficient attention to how employees' work is organized. Let's move on. What did Coonrat do? He answered the question of why people pay for the privilege to work harder in their chosen sport or leisure activity than they do at work where they are paid. In other words, this question interested him in the book. Why do people pay money for sports, sweat and try hard, but don't try as hard at work where they are paid? And he came to 5 conclusions that hobbies or sports had 5 elements that were less pronounced at work, and he recommended implementing these findings at work. What do you think these were? What was in hobbies or sports that people lacked and still lack at work, so that we are willing to pay money for our hobbies and sports, and we are sometimes more motivated there than at work where we are paid? So what are we missing at work? What do we get from sports or hobbies? Competitive spirit. Okay. Thank you, Julia. What else? There are more options. Maybe if you have a favorite hobby or play sports, think about how it differs from your job. What don't you have at work that you have in this sport? Enjoyment, movement. Okay, thank you for your suggestions. What did the author of the book conclude? First, he found that in hobbies and sports there are often clearly defined goals, while at work they don't always exist. This problem still persists today. Many companies still lack a goal-setting system. People work without goals. Next, better tracking and scorecards. Indeed, there's still a desire to succeed, to achieve better results. Even now, many employees at work don't understand how well they're performing. In other words, people at work don't have any statistics or reports to help them understand how well they're doing. Some have them thanks to automation systems, and some don't. That's why various dashboards are very popular now, such as scorecards, Power BI, Qlik, Google Data Studio, or reporting in ERP or CRM systems. The better people can see their current score, the more motivated they are. Next, more frequent feedback is present in sports and hobbies, but not in many workplaces. For example, if you're doing sports, the coach might say, "You've put on some weight again," or "You seem a bit weak today, come on, push harder," which managers do less often. Next is a higher degree of personal choice in methods. That is, in sports and hobbies, a person can choose. At work, they don't always have the right to choose. They're told how to do things which they might not like. And consistent coaching is something that exists in sports and hobbies, but again, is often missing at work. In sports, a person is trained. There's a coach who cares for them. At work, a manager doesn't always fulfill this role. This is why people are so motivated in hobbies and sports and less motivated at work. It's something worth thinking about. Moving on, so why does gamification work? There's a more progressive term for gamification. It's called human-centered design. That is, when a company develops something with a very good understanding of human nature and optimizes everything for human motivation, not just for system functionality, then the company creates more engaging work. Because traditional companies, factories, and retail only thought about business and process efficiency. That's what they were interested in. They designed work to make the system more efficient. How a person feels or thinks was often of no interest to anyone. This pure systematization of business without concern for people is the opposite of gamification, where it's the other way around. Everything is done with consideration for what motivates a person, what interests them, how to create an environment and work where a person will strongly want to work on their own without needing to be forced. Therefore, it's possible that gamification will soon change its name. People won't talk about gamification. They will talk about human design or human-centric design, where an organization is developed for humans and human nature, rather than for processes, machines, and other things that should work at the system level. Can you give some real-life examples of how companies use gamification? Well, I'm sure you also participate in various systems. For example, the United States military spends a lot of money on recruiting people through gamification. That is, much more than the marketing budget of very large businesses. Volkswagen, through the idea of gamification, came up with the People's Car project, where they attracted 33 million people to their website and gathered 100,000 ideas for a new people's car. Nike also uses gamification very often. Even now they had Nike Fuel. Now it's Nike Run Club. If you have an Apple Watch, there's a Nike Run Club app on it, or you can install it if it's not pre-installed, depending on the series. And there are many different ideas there. If you run, you definitely know about all the achievements, different statuses, and other things there. Next, with the help of Chegg, students increased the time they spent on the site and improved their results through gamification. In 10 days, Folded Gamers solved an AIDS virus protein problem that had baffled researchers for 15 years, and so on. So gamification is now used everywhere. Any loyalty programs, as I mentioned before, cashbacks, savings, points, miles, these airline miles, are also examples of gamification. All of this is built on the principles of gamification. There are many examples. In today's presentation, you'll see over 90 examples in English and a little fewer in Russian of how companies are using gamification. I think you can add a lot more examples yourselves. Let's move on. What gamification is based on? There are two approaches. One approach is very simple, which says that gamification is built on points, badges, and rankings. So, if you want to gamify something, you need to start awarding people points for something. Give them badges for certain achievements, and create a performance ranking for different people. This is already basic gamification. It's a very, very basic level that can be applied by simple companies, but it doesn't always work. There are more advanced approaches that we'll talk about today. For example, how it can work in VR at a very, very basic level. For instance, the gamification of onboarding. If we use only these three components, we'll do something like this. For employee onboarding, we'll develop a list of actions that they must complete to adapt. For example, register somewhere, meet someone, complete a training, pass an exam, do something else, and so on. For each action, we'll assign points. For example, complete this task, get 100 points. Fill out a survey at the end of the first week, get so many more points. Then we'll give out badges. For every 100 points, we'll say, you have a green badge, here's a yellow one, here's a red one, a gold badge, and we'll create rankings. We'll show people how successfully or unsuccessfully they're doing compared to others. This will already be gamification of the onboarding process. But this doesn't mean everything will work perfectly. Well, at least there will be a basic level of gamification. There's a slightly more expanded version with even more elements. That is, there are points, badges, and rankings. There are also different levels, contests, feedback, goals, rules, and tasks. This is more complex gamification, but not necessarily better quality or more motivating. Because for more motivating gamification, it's very important to understand human behavior. How people behave is also called behavioral economics. It's important to understand that just because you bring game elements into work doesn't necessarily mean that work becomes more interesting. In other words, gamifying a process doesn't automatically mean it will be better or more interesting. There are many, just millions and millions of unsuccessful, uninteresting games, and the same applies to work. So there's no need to hold on to an illusion. You shouldn't assume that any gamification will be motivating, because it's important to understand how it works more deeply, to understand deeper motives, and to use more advanced tools. So if you've ever encountered gamification that doesn't work, it's not because gamification itself doesn't work. It's because the gamification wasn't designed well enough. For example, most loyalty programs work poorly. You carry that card around, you accumulate points, but it hardly motivates anyone to buy more. It's just a way to save up and spend something. Originally, loyalty programs with points were all planned with the expectation that you would buy significantly more. Most of them don't work very well. So all of this is poor game design. When we start by asking what game elements we want to add to work, we forget about the person and their motivation, and we're setting up the wrong kind of gamification from the start. What do you think is the question we should start with to ensure good gamification? What question should you ask yourself first when developing any gamification? Well, Julia immediately wrote, why? Not bad. What other questions should you ask yourself when designing a gamification system to ensure it turns out well? You have some options. What does it affect? Yes. How do we measure it? Well, definitely not questions like how many points to award for this or that, or what rewards to give at the end of the game. What am I curious about? That's also a good question. Overall, it's the right question. Okay, how do I want my employees to feel? Do I want them to feel inspired? Do I want them to feel proud? Should they be afraid? Worry? What is my goal for their intended experience? What employee need do we want to address? Yes, that's a much better question you're suggesting. And the second question is, what game elements and mechanics can help me achieve the goals of making players feel the way I want them to? So that should be the second question. What game mechanics do I need here? Definitely not the first. First, there should be a goal. What I want from employees, what results, what emotions, what behavior, and then what tools will help me. What can I take from games to make this work? That's when it would be the right approach. Now let's talk about gamification models. It's called octalysis because octa means 8, and there are 8 facets here. The second part is the word analysis. That's how we got octalysis. This is one of the world's leading modern gamification models, developed by one of the authors whose book I'll recommend to you at the end. So he says that gamification is built around 8 components. There is one secret 9th component. The 8 components are mission, achievement, ownership, scarcity, security, curiosity, social influence, and creativity. And most gamified processes, whether in computer games or businesses that we'll look at, they engage these elements to varying degrees. There are also nuances like how they're engaged at different stages of the user lifecycle, and they can be different for different users, but this is the basic model. So this model, here we have a more detailed breakdown of each element. For example, let's look at ownership. This can include virtual goods, starting from scratch, collectible sets, the ability to be independent, earned lunch, learning curve, protection, and recruitment. There are many examples from computer games here because that's where it comes from. But then all of this is applied to business. Now let's go through each element in turn how it works, allowing you to gamify something. And as you look at these components, analyze how you can incorporate them into your HR processes. For example, mission. Mission, as a gamification stimulus, works when the user believes they've been chosen for a specific mission or are doing something important. This isn't about tourist behavior. It could simply be a desire to obtain something for oneself. Unfortunately, even many not so good events have occurred precisely because fanatics believed in something lofty. But if we look at good examples, for example, Wikipedia users, volunteers, they create content and populate it for free because they understand that there's some higher mission they're following. And there's no reward here, but they believe it allows for the development of human knowledge. So if you can introduce some kind of mission into any of your HR processes, then that process will be more gamified. For example, from what I know, many companies that gamify sales, that gamify the motivation of salespeople, they add some kind of war to the mission, like competitors. Competitors might be given some names, fictitiously of course, and people understand that they're fighting against enemies disguised as competitors. And that's what drives them. Next, the second factor or driver of gamification is achievement. This is the motivation that many of us have. We want to achieve something, we want challenges. So when there are challenges, that also motivates people. This is also, again, not just about standard approaches like points, badges, and leaderboards, but about some interesting types of achievements that motivate a person to accomplish something. For example, this is also actively used. They have several such achievements in their app. For example, run 3 times in a row in a week, run on Sunday, run 5 kilometers there, run 10 kilometers. By the way, this achievement can often work well from the perspective of the job itself. That is, when a person's job is inherently interesting and challenging, it includes an element of gamification. Let's pause here and I'll ask you a question. Tell me, what about a cash bonus? Does it somehow motivate people, add elements of gamification or not? If you think it does, put a plus sign. If you think it doesn't, put a minus sign. Plus, minus, plus. Yes, okay. Look what's interesting. If the cash bonus is calculated correctly, if it's not just falling out of the blue, but if the employee understands how it's calculated, if there's a formula, an opportunity to influence it, then it motivates people because they see it as points or scores. So for them, the numbers they receive as a bonus are like points they earn. And very often with cash bonuses, people are motivated not so much by the value of the money they'll receive, but by how many points they earn, especially if they understand how many points could have been earned in total and how many others have earned. This part can be quite motivating and ends up gamifying the process. It's not because I want to earn $1,000, but because I know that $1,000 is the highest bonus, and I'm aiming for it. And only 1% or less than 1% of people will receive such a bonus. That's how it sometimes works, not because it's some money that's desperately needed. Next, creativity, another factor of gamification that helps motivate people. This involves engaging players in a creative process where people unlock their potential. They get creative, people develop something, do something, can make choices, and accordingly receive feedback. There are many different aspects to this as well. In any case, when a company incorporates elements of creativity, elements of coming up with something new into the work, it gamifies the process. people start to feel more motivated. Or, for example, it gives people the opportunity to figure out how to perform a particular task or challenges people. What else is interesting? For example, in this course, we'll be talking about the gamification of innovation. The gamification of innovation is about creativity, because when people think about how to improve something in a company, they're essentially coming up with something new. They come up with something that can be implemented, they think outside the box. This is what stimulates them. So again, if it's all properly structured, without errors, and around the right motives, then it motivates them. Next, ownership. People are motivated by a sense of ownership or feeling of possessing something. So this is the motivation that's related to possession, with the desire to improve, protect, and multiply something. A person can have various hobbies in life. People like to collect stamps, calendars, and many other things. And sometimes it's not just material things. It can be some intangible things, knowledge, experience. There are people who collect books they've read and are proud of it. This is also about that kind of motivation. I'm sure many of you collected something as a child. For example, I used to collect turbo gum inserts, so I've placed them here as an illustration, but you probably collected something too. When a company comes up with such an element, that is, gives people the opportunity to collect or accumulate something. Often these are various statuettes, diplomas. For example, when I worked at Alpha Bank, we had a program called Time of the Proactive. There were several nominations each quarter. The bank chose the best employees for each nomination, and there were some guys whose entire office was covered with diplomas, and they were proud of it. They had the ambition to earn as many as possible. And for this, they worked hard. It was exciting what they came up with and so on. Well, and all topics related to collecting are built around people's desire to possess something. So think about it. Maybe you have something in your company that you could do to create this sense of possession. The next driver of gamification is sociality. This is when people want to be part of a certain community. It involves interaction with other people from this community and a sense of belonging to a particular group. It's about understanding how this community behaves. For example, when I worked at the STB TV channel, we had various initiatives. We created a closed community on Facebook where everyone could join, and it was called the TV Mafia. It was a community for people in the television industry, and the opportunity to join this community was a way to belong to something interesting. And there are many different communities, possibly even secret ones. This is what people are interested in. There are all kinds of business societies, communities of entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and so on. What could this look like in a company? When I worked at Alpha Bank, we had a meeting for key employees of the bank. And it was for people who were considered such key employees. And everyone was very interested, and all these key employees wanted to get in because the understanding that you're part of a community of people was motivating. You can create this in your company too. For example, if you want to motivate people, there's often a problem that few people want to be a mentor who wants to be a mentor for other employees. Here, Varvara asks where everyone is putting a plus sign. They're putting a plus in the chat, but in our open sessions, the chat isn't visible to all of you. Only I can see your responses in the Zoom chat. So usually in companies, it's difficult to get people to be mentors for newcomers. People often ask how we can motivate mentors to work with newcomers, whether they should be paid some money. One idea is that you can create a community, for example, of mentors or a mentors club. Well, I don't know, in your business, it could be some unique name that attracts everyone, or mentors maybe, and include only those who act as mentors for new employees. Organize events for them, give them some distinctive badges, and this will be a good motivation for people to participate in mentoring programs. It's social that they're becoming part of something. The same can be done for other areas. You can create a social group for those who are adapting, for other segments where you need to attract people to something, also social groups, because people like to belong. Well, yes, I used LinkedIn as the logo here. Many people registered and still register on LinkedIn just because it's trendy. Many people are there, so I'll register too, without any clear need to do anything there. Let's move on. Scarcity. This is also something that motivates people to take certain actions. It's the desire to possess something that's not available, the desire to be part of some exclusivity, to own something rare, something that's hard to get. As an example, I've posted the IKEA shark here. There was such a hype recently. Everyone wanted this shark. Some people even started buying them up and reselling them for higher prices because there was such a buzz. Everyone wanted to get their hands on one. Companies can also create scarcity of certain items and build some gamification around it. For example, some cool corporate merch, like a vest or some other really cool item that will be in limited supply and which people will get for doing something specific. Everyone will understand that these items are scarce and not available to everyone. Or, for example, something interesting that some companies do is give good watches, gold watches, or just some elite watches to people who have been working for a very long time. This is also scarcity. So you understand that not everyone gets these watches. Very few do. If you work for a certain number of years, you will get them too. That is an element of gamification. The next element is uncertainty. Uncertainty or unpredictability stimulates curiosity, makes you think about the unknown, and wonder what will happen next. It is actively used in gambling and lotteries. It helps you finish a book, watch a movie to the end, complete a game, and it is used the same way in marketing to create uncertainty. How can this be applied? For example, I know a company that uses the principle of uncertainty as motivation for salespeople. The company has the following scheme. The sales department holds a weekly lottery in which only the top performing salespeople can participate. Those who sold the most during the week get to participate in the lottery. This lottery has a drum and balls, and inside each ball there is a prize ranging from something simple like a movie ticket to something expensive like an iPhone. These prizes stay in the drum and are not removed. So everyone understands that winning an iPhone is a real possibility. That is why people strive to show results so they can participate in the lottery and possibly win an iPhone. Some companies might offer something more substantial. You know, there is often a contest like and share to win a car or an apartment. Of course, this approach is a bit overused, but it is what really motivates people. The opportunity to step into the unknown? Let us move on. The next element is safety. It is the desire to prevent something negative or a loss of security. This is a very specific motive. It might work well once, but then people will likely start avoiding it. For example, Booking.com uses this when they say rooms are about to be booked, and you quickly click the button to select a room because you want to stay safe. In general, Booking.com uses a huge number of gamification elements on their site. There are many examples. At the end of today's lesson, there's even a link about how Booking.com, to put it mildly, motivates or manipulates people to make purchases. Check it out, it's very interesting. I think many who have bought on Booking.com will find it interesting to learn how it works. Next, the secret ninth ingredient is one that engages a certain sense in gamification. It's when a person, and this isn't always possible, it's almost impossible in computer games, experiences physical sensations, hearing, sight, smell, touch, or even taste. So a company can gamify a process if it engages a person's senses. And here's what's interesting about this. If you go into a good store, the store adds a special scent. I don't know if you've noticed it or not. I recently examined this closely in a furniture store. They have all sorts of things. It's not just a simple spray, a one-time thing, but a whole device that spreads scent to different parts of the store and special fragrances, which are developed to create a cozy atmosphere. This is also one of the approaches to gamification. Now, what's also interesting is that these 8 plus the ninth secret ingredient of gamification cover both logical factors of people's decision-making as well as emotional ones, that is, the left and right hemispheres of the brain. The ones on the left focus more on logic, while the ones on the right focus more on creativity and emotions. Consequently, a person is simultaneously motivated by both logical factors and decisions, as well as creative ones. But that's not all. There's also a division between top and bottom. The top gamification factors are more about the positive things a person gains. The lower factors are more about the negative aspects. And people are motivated by both positive and negative things. Positive experiences cause people to produce dopamine, a hormone of positive feelings, the happiness hormone. Due to the negative factors of gamification, cortisol is produced. Well, you know that people sometimes like to take risks. People sometimes like to get their adrenaline pumping. This motivates them too. That's why it's important to strike the right balance. Overall, the theory of gamification is truly based on an in-depth study of people, their motivations, and how they behave. It leverages these motivations in work. Let's move on. How companies use this, for example. That is, an interesting case study of Google with a problem that the company faced and didn't know how to solve. So at Google, like in many other companies, employees go on business trips. As in many other companies, employees don't like to report expenses after a business trip. And this is necessary for accounting purposes and generally for keeping things in order. What did Google do? They implemented gamification. They offered people returning from business trips to decide what to do with the amount they didn't spend. It allows you to choose either to receive the unspent amount from the trip as part of your salary, or to spend it on the next business trip to better organize it, or to donate it to charity. To do this, you need to fill out a special report, indicating where you spent everything, how much you spent on what, and what to do with the remaining balance. There's always some left over, and people are motivated by the fact that they want to do something with this balance. It's not a lot of money for the company, and this balance is there to be spent. But thanks to this balance, The company gets 100% completion of travel documents after employees return from their business trips. Now let's look at examples of systems built on gamification. The first system is the bonusly system. So there are many systems for gamification. In this course, we'll be looking at different processes, and I'll talk about what systems are available for each process. For example, the bonusly system. Put a plus if you've heard of it before, and a minus if you're hearing about it for the first time. In this system, each employee is given 100 points, which they can spend on thanking another person. That is, a person logging into the system writes, "I'm thanking my colleague with 10 points for doing this awesome thing, and this thing is related to such and such value." And here you can see who gets how many points. Also, as an employee, if I'm thanked, I accumulate points and can spend them too. Thus, the system shows who received what points, and every employee can participate. That is, everyone can add their own points. I see that someone did something cool. I can donate or spend the points that the company has credited to me. Again, I can't take my own points back for myself. I have to give mine to someone else. Someone can give me theirs for something good I've done. The system has integration with a messenger like Slack, so people could do this directly in Slack. There's an app, and there are numerous places where you can use the points. PayPal, iTunes, Amazon, Starbucks, Domino's Pizza, and so on. There's a lot of options available. 870 locations where you can redeem points. This is the kind of gamification of the process of recognizing achievements at the employee-to-employee level. Gamification that strengthens corporate culture in terms of encouraging behavior within desired values. That's how it works. There are also statistics, so you can see who uses it, how many points they've accumulated, and so on. The second system is a Russian language one called Pryaniki, gingerbread. You might have heard of it too, just put a plus if you have, a minus if you haven't heard of it. This system also has virtual currency, a gift shop, badges, ratings, contests, and various processes that can be gamified. When I worked at Wargaming, the company used Pryaniki to gamify the onboarding process. That's the kind of problem it solved, but it can do much more. You'll have a link here too, just like for Bonusly. Here you can see how it's written. That is, someone thanks someone else, there are comments, points accumulation, points can be exchanged in the store, and so on. Another system that uses elements of gamification. The 15F system is a performance management system, which uses gamification elements to encourage people to use the system. In particular, there's also a gratitude system. But unlike the bonus system where points are accumulated, here there's a public wall where all thank you notes are visible, and there's a ranking of who received the most thanks, who gave out the most thanks, and employees can see how many thank you notes they've given and received. It's a similar system. Here's an example of what the thank you notes look like here. Unlike pointless bonuses, these are simply pure expressions of gratitude. There's a mobile app, so you can do this from your phone. There's integration with Slack and so on. Now, what can you read on the topic of gamification? First, I recommend reading an article about Booking.com, which hacks people using cognitive biases. Essentially, it uses gamification systems in sales. How does the integration of the bonus system work with other company systems? Usually, a system like the bonus system can pull a list of employees. You need to look at what integrations are available. It might be able to pull a list of employees from your system and synchronize that way. So, your system probably doesn't need to provide anything. It's just so you don't have to manually add each employee. It can update from the system. The second source is a book about gamification. You see, this is the Octalysis model by author Yukai Cho, who was once a very passionate gamer himself. He played Diablo and achieved high scores. He played other computer games too. Then he realized he was spending too much time on computer games and decided to dedicate himself to real life. But he thought about how to make real life into a game, and by researching game principles, he came up with this analysis that's being implemented in companies. So today, the Octalysis concept that we've been discussing, and will continue to examine alongside real examples, is one of the most modern gamification models. Here's the homework for those already on the course. Take one HR process, anyone. Onboarding, recruiting, sales team motivation, employee retention, whatever you like, and map it to the 8 factors of the gamification model. What mechanics can be incorporated so that it aligns with these factors? For example, let's say our company is retail stores, and onboarding is the process we want to gamify. Start with the first factor, mission and right. To engage the mission factor in onboarding, we'll give the person a story where we say they have a personal mission to prepare for a trip to Mars. They'll have certain actions to take. So you detail each element, each of the 8 factors for your process. How can you specifically engage it for this process? For now, keep it very general, without any points, formulas, or complex mechanics. Just describe how you envision it for now. The idea is to bring the 8 elements of gamification, or even a 9th one with emotions, into the process to make it more engaging for people, so they're more willing to participate. With this, we conclude today's topic on the basics of gamification. In the second session, we'll talk about the gamification of recruiting. That is, what can be done in recruiting to make it more interesting and fun, so that the tasks performed and solved in recruiting become easier and more engaging for people. With this, today's session comes to an end. I would be grateful if you could write down what was most valuable for you today, what you're taking away, and what insights or ideas you've gained. The end. Thank you, Julia. What else? Thank you, the book is great. I will definitely read it. You're welcome. Thanks, all the information was new to me, like the Pryaniki type bonus system. Yes, in this course we will be looking at many systems and case studies on gamification, not just the model we studied today, but also their application. And in your homework, you will be gamifying your processes and thinking about how to implement this. Okay? That's all for now then. Very useful bonus programs. It is cool that rewards can be integrated and connected to all applications. I learned a new concept, what gamification is. All right, thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone. See you in a week. We will continue with this course. Do your homework. I will be eagerly waiting for them and will check them. That's all. Bye-bye. See you soon.